From mutants who can barely move a paperclip to gods who can rewrite entire universes with 3 words, the X-Men power scale goes way deeper than any movie has ever shown you. Storm, Jean Grey, Magneto. You think you know how powerful they are. You don't. And by the end of this video, you'll never look at them the same way again. Storm. To start with, we've got Storm, and to really understand why she sits so high on this list, we actually have to look at the exact definition of what makes someone an Omega. Back in 2019, writer Jonathan Hickman officially redefined X-Men lore in House of X #1 by finally giving fans a strict in-universe definition of an Omega-level mutant. He defined it as a mutant whose dominant power has no real upper limit. It means no matter how hard you measure their specific ability, there's no ceiling to their potential. Now, if we look at the Fox universe, the movies didn't really showcase that all too well. In live action, Storm's treated as a highly effective but localized weather manipulator. We see her coordinating massive synchronized tornadoes to wipe out fighter jets in X2, heavily altering the atmosphere of Alkali Lake and raining down intense lightning barrages against Apocalypse. Powerful? No doubt. She earns that Omega status, which in the films is referred to as being a Class 5 mutant. But when you take her feats from the comics and Hickman's whole upper limit thing, you realize her movie output actually isn't all that impressive. In the comic books, Storm's a literal goddess. She doesn't just make it snow or rain on Earth, she can manipulate atmospheric and elemental patterns on a galactic scale. We're talking about her casually controlling the solar winds in the vacuum of space to propel a spaceship, manipulating the primal elemental energies of the galactic core, and heavily assisting in single-handedly terraforming the entire planet of Mars just to make it habitable for the mutant nation of Arakko. The movies gave us a brilliant weather witch, but the comics gave us an elemental heavyweight who can physically bend the atmosphere of entire planets to her will. Jean Grey. As impressive as someone like Storm is, when it comes to Jean Grey, she's just not in the same league. Throughout the entire Fox franchise, she's the only character who was explicitly stated to be a Class 5 mutant. Xavier had to place psychic blocks on her because her telekinetic potential was so extremely massive. Without them, she had a real chance of tearing reality apart. When you look at her actual on-screen feats, it's just one massive feat after another. She casually atomizes Professor X even as he's trying to resist, completely decimates dozens of people, and then single-handedly kills Apocalypse, who had previously ragdolled almost everyone. And that is just her own innate raw power. And by the way, the Phoenix Force isn't why she's an Omega-level mutant. She's classified as that in the comics, even without the Phoenix Force. And with it, she's one of the strongest characters in all of Marvel. But let's talk about just her plain basic abilities. In Grant Morrison's new X-Men run, Emma Frost's indestructible diamond form was completely shattered into thousands of pieces. Jean used her telepathy to essentially download Beast's medical and anatomical knowledge directly into her own brain, and then used her telekinesis on a microscopic level to perfectly reconstruct Emma's shattered diamond body, molecule by molecule. That's godly precision. Then, in the Generations run, she literally knocked Galactus down. A young, time-displaced Jean Grey figured out how to perfectly synergize her telepathy and telekinesis to absorb the ambient psionic energy of everyone on the battlefield. She used that gathered energy to hit Galactus with a telekinetic blow so unbelievably hard that it literally knocked the Devourer of Worlds completely off his feet. While she's this powerful on her own, you can't talk about her without also getting into the Phoenix Force. What happens when that Omega-level brain becomes the perfect host for a cosmic entity? If we talk about raw, terrifying destruction, the classic Dark Phoenix saga gives us the most iconic feat in X-Men history. Driven mad by the power, Jean flew across the universe, submerged herself entirely inside a massive star, and completely consumed its solar energy. She casually caused the star to go supernova, instantly wiping out an entire solar system and billions of lives. But her absolute peak isn't destruction, it's creation. At the end of Grant Morrison's new X-Men run, Jean achieves her ultimate form, the White Phoenix of the Crown. In this state, she transcends physical reality entirely. She is literally shown holding an entire corrupted timeline in the palm of her hand. With a single thought, she essentially burns away the corrupted future, amputating a dying universe and perfectly rewriting reality to save the X-Men. Yeah, there are a few of these reality-altering, almost omnipotent types, and Jean Grey's been one of them for decades now. Magneto. If you look at Magneto's history in the Fox movies, we really got two completely different flavors of his power. With Ian McKellen's portrayal, you had masterful surgical precision. It showed you the kind of extreme control Magneto has over his powers, which is mostly what makes him truly terrifying. With Michael Fassbender, we get to see more of the sheer scope of his powers though, and why they call him an Omega-level mutant. One of the best examples is when he goes for a deep dive into Earth's crust and completely messes with the planet's magnetic poles. He pretty much effortlessly causes global destruction with almost no effort, and that's just something he casually decided to do. Kinda makes you think about what these guys are like when they're out for blood. But the films kind of make it seem like Magneto needed Apocalypse to boost his powers so he could reach that level. But he's never really needed a boost, because in the comics, Magneto is one of the most powerful characters ever. Sure, he's no Rune King Thor or Jean Grey, but this guy is still a force of nature. He has total control over electromagnetism, which is literally one of the 4 fundamental forces of the universe. Let's just look at X-Men number 25, the 1993 one. You think Wolverine's tough, right? Being hard to kill is like his number 2 defining trait, with the first being his adamantium skeleton. Well, Magneto ripped that adamantium skeleton right out of his body, forcing the liquid metal out through Logan's skin. It's absolutely savage. But honestly, his biggest, most absolute Omega-level flex is the Uncanny X-Men number 521. Kitty Pryde is trapped inside this massive metal breakworld bullet that's rocketing through deep space at light speed. Magneto, all the way from Earth, goes into a deep trance, stretches his mind across the literal cosmos, locks onto a bullet that is light years away, and physically drags it all the way back home. The movies have a habit of nerfing Marvel's top dogs. Even in the movies, Magneto needs to help take down Apocalypse, and Jean Grey's the one who ultimately does it. In X-Men Omega, though, the entire massive crossover builds to this final brutal showdown between the two of them. Apocalypse is presented as this towering, seemingly indestructible god who has conquered North America. But during the fight, Eric realizes a massive fatal flaw. Saba Noor's body and armor are heavily infected with techno-organic metal. Magneto focuses his power, locks onto those metallic elements flowing right through Apocalypse's bloodstream, and literally tears the immortal mutant in half with sheer magnetic force. Iceman. So, Bobby Drake actually unlocked his powers pretty late. What makes Bobby so unique on this list is that his cinematic journey is an actual multi-movie progression. We watch him slowly level up from a teenager who can just cool down a cup of tea in the first X-Men movie to a seasoned fighter finally tapping into his true potential. By the time we hit the apocalyptic future in Days of Future Past, he unlocks his full ice form, and that gives him a massive boost to his powers, even being able to freeze fire itself. His overall output increases tenfold, and he's able to freeze heavily armored Sentinels too. He ultimately dies here because the Sentinels overwhelm him. Nobody's immune to being jumped, I guess. But despite his incredible powers, he still gets the short end of the stick. The movies treat him as a typical ice user who just shoots cold air out of his hands. In the comics, his powers are a lot more specific. He doesn't just control ice, he controls thermodynamics in general. He can stop molecular motion and manipulate temperature on a global scale. For the longest time, Bobby actually held himself back because he was really scared of his own power. In Uncanny X-Men number 314, Emma Frost's consciousness actually takes over Bobby's body. Because she has no mental blocks, she immediately uses his powers in ways he never dreamed of. She figures out how he can instantly travel miles away by merging his consciousness with a rushing river, and she effortlessly freezes the internal fluids inside a security guard's body just to make a point. It's pretty much exactly the same as when Doc Ock takes over Spidey's body in Superior Spider-Man and realizes just how much Peter holds back. But those are still small-scale feats for the Iceman. In the comics, when the Hellfire Club attacks the New Mutant school, Bobby stops holding back and reveals that he's also capable of cloning himself. He creates a massive army of autonomous sentient ice clones and giant ice golems to fight off the invaders simultaneously across the entire campus. The movies gave us a guy who makes ice slides, but the comics give us an immortal thermodynamic god who can exist in every drop of water on Earth. Cassandra Nova. The freshest addition to the Omega roster is Cassandra Nova. The first time we see her is in Deadpool and Wolverine, and she actually gets classified as an Omega-level telepath by the TVA. Watching her fight, you wouldn't think she's a telepath, but her performance is some of the most visceral telepathy and telekinesis we've seen on screen. She can physically phase through people, including inserting her fingers into someone's skull.
What do you want, Wade Wilson?
Her fingers are inside me, but not in a good way.
We see her effortlessly blow away Wolverine and Deadpool with the flick of a hand, and she dominates the entire void due to her power.
Mummy and Daddy are having a conversation.
Plus, even powerful heroes like Johnny Storm mean nothing to her. She literally ripped the skin right off of him with just her mind, reducing a legendary Marvel powerhouse into a pile of bones in about 2 seconds flat.
I don't...
Cassandra's also the only person besides Kang who has ever been able to tame Goliath.
This has been fun, but the big guy needs to eat and the rent is due. By the way, you're the rent.
She has a really symbiotic relationship with Goliath. She feeds him unwanted variants, and in exchange, he seems to leave her alone. Hell, Goliath is pretty much her personal pet. So here we have someone who can travel anywhere in the universe, tame cosmic entities, and absolutely dog-walk Marvel's top dogs. That's the kind of level an Omega mutant is at. Plus, she isn't a glass cannon either. People like Xavier or Emma, they usually go down in a couple of good hits. When Wolverine literally stabs her through the chest and heart, and Deadpool pierces her with a knife, her telekinesis is so incredibly advanced that she just casually puppeteers her own broken body to snap her bones back into place. She doesn't even look hurt. She can even use sling rings without any real formal training. But to understand why she's an extinction-level threat, we have to look deep into the comics' history. Cassandra is the psychic twin sister of Charles Xavier. She is a mummadrive, which is basically a being that acts as a mirror to your own self. They're alien, and they're really weird. The easiest way to understand her is to imagine Xavier's raw telepathic power with none of his moral constraints. Cassandra actually gained control of a fleet of massive, self-replicating wild sentinels in the comics and sent them directly to the mutant island nation. This was known as the Genosha Massacre, and it was every bit as brutal as it sounds. She exterminated 16 million mutants in minutes. By the way, that's more than every MCU villain has ever killed, excluding Thanos and the biggest bads like Kang. Wanda Maximoff / Professor X. Before we wrap this up, we have to throw an honorable mention to 2 heavy hitters, Wanda Maximoff and Professor X. Wanda's case is really complicated. This is a character whose entire comic history is defined by 2 things: sheer reality warping power and retcons, and some more retcons. You see, originally, Wanda and Pietro were considered mutants, and Wanda was the child of Magneto. But in a massive retcon that took place in 2015's Uncanny Avengers, it was revealed that she was actually never a mutant at all. Instead, her extreme powers came from genetic experiments performed by the High Evolutionary. Before that retcon, when she was still considered a mutant, she pulled off the most devastating reality warping feat in Marvel history. In 2005's House of M, Wanda suffered a complete mental breakdown, much like her WandaVision story, except this time, she didn't rewrite one small town. She uttered 3 simple words, and in a blinding flash of white light, she altered the biology of every single mutant, instantly erasing the powers of 99% of the mutant population and bringing the entire species to the brink of extinction. Even in the MCU, she is the ultimate reality breaker. In Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, we literally watch her cast a hex on an entire population, rewrite reality, and create a new family from scratch. Then you have Professor X. Even in the movies, he's considered a really powerful telepath. He's got some ridiculous feats too, like freezing an entire museum of people. Plus, when a brain disease makes him lose control of his powers, we get to see just how dangerous he truly is. So, why is he an honorable mention and not an Omega-level mutant? Because in the comics, Marvel officially confirmed that he isn't one. When Jonathan Hickman redefined the X-Men lore in House of X, he published the official Omega Protocol list, which you can see for yourself on the screen. It's established that he's alpha level here. So, sorry Charles, but you didn't make the cut. That still doesn't mean he can't ruin your life though. In the movies, besides Jean Grey, he really is the most powerful telepath on the planet. And if you go into the comics, well, let's just say that when he stops being nice, it's not a pretty sight. This guy once put Magneto in a coma because he was just so done with him. And when I say coma, I mean he entered his mind and completely wiped it clean, leaving him a vegetable. A lot of these guys have so many more amazing feats from the comics, and if you'd be interested in a part 2, I'd love to make a breakdown of the strongest feats of each Omega-level mutant. But from telepaths to literal cosmic goddesses and weather witches, the X-Men are some of the most powerful characters in all of Marvel, with no real limit to how far some of them can go.